What's going on, everybody? So my name's Cowboy Chuck, and over the last few years playing Squad, a number of people come into my stream and they ask, should I get this game? How can I, how can I get better at the game? Or what are some helpful tips for new Squad players? Well, after playing this game now for well over 6.5 years, I figured it was time to maybe give some perspective of a everyday player as a founder slash backer for the game, but also to share with you my perspective on things that I've found to be the most helpful as a new player. So first things first, when you purchase Squad on Steam or through Humble Bundle or any other authorized outlet that gives you a Steam validation code and you install it, my first recommendation to you is after you've installed the game, restart your computer, because there are changes that are made to files on your computer that sometimes will not act correctly or behave correctly when you try to launch the game the first time you've installed it. After you've restarted your game and you've launched Steam, come back to your Squad installation right here on Steam, right click, choose Properties, go to the third option, which is Local Files, and do Verify Integrity of Game Files. The reason I tell people to do that is even with a fresh Squad installation, occasionally a file will not come down correctly. I've had instances where I've run a fresh install on Squad and it fails to launch, and it'll give you a failure code and it'll shut down the game and you'll have to relaunch Squad. And I've gone through that iteration multiple times, and I finally verified files literally 3 times in a row, and then the game found 4 files that were missing. So it took a couple restarts and verifying local files, but we figured it out. So that's just one of my recommendations. Second recommendation for you is the minimum specs for PC to run Squad are actually, in my opinion, setting you up for an incorrect / inaccurate experience within the game. If you use the minimum specs based upon what's told for you to launch Squad and play it, you're going to have a horrible experience based upon my past experience on PCs that I've used in this game. So they say an Intel Core i series or AMD Ryzen with at least 4 cores. I can tell you that that's not accurate, because I had a i7 4790K, I've had an i5 4690K, and I've had a i7 9700K. All 3 have had their own performance challenges with Squad for one major reason. Squad is a very CPU intensive game. So in my opinion, the best thing you can do is, based upon your budget, get the highest CPU you can. I would not go below an i7 series. If you can afford an i9 series, I would. If you're going to go with AMD, and for years Squad struggled with AMD CPUs, I would encourage you to go for a 5 series AMD processor or higher. As far as operating system, they tell you Windows 7 64-bit, Service Pack 1, or x64 platform, Windows 7 is no longer supported, so why would you install a game on there that could potentially fail on you? And I realize when Windows 7 is fairly stable, but it's no longer supported, so if you encounter an operating system issue, you're going to have to pay a third-party technician or basically reinstall everything from scratch and hope you don't encounter that error again. So everything is up to the Windows 10 standard. In another year or two, Windows 10 is no longer going to be supported. As far as RAM goes, 8 gig of memory is not going to get it. It's not going to work. 16 gig is the bare minimum, and it needs to be high speed. So you need to have RAM speed, in my opinion, of at least 3,000. The highest speed that your motherboard can accommodate is the best option. So you need to spend your money on CPU, RAM, and GPU, and the best combination that you can get within your budget to at least give you the best opportunity to have a positive experience in the game. With regards to a video card, it doesn't matter what series of video card you have or you're thinking about getting. If that video card does not have at least 6 gig of video RAM, you're setting yourself up for failure, because they tell you a minimum of 4 gig of video RAM. That's not accurate. It needs to be at least 6. My card has 8 gig of video RAM, and there's still certain instances where I get low frames because of how the game is not optimized to its fullest. And they're still working on those things, but that's just a piece of advice for you. As far as free space, I'm going to tell you from a PC configuration standpoint, you need two SSDs. You need an SSD for your operating system, so anything 250 to 500 gig for operating system will be fine. And then you need a second SSD, in my opinion, to run Squad, because if you're running it on a traditional mechanical platter-based hard drive that just, with the 5400 and the 7200 RPM drives, you're setting yourself up for failure, because your load times will be extensively greater than others and your in-game performance is going to suffer. So get the 2 best SSDs you can find, the highest amount of RAM you can find, highest CPU, GPU, and motherboard combination that your budget can afford. And if you need to, piece it out over time and just wait until you can afford everything. All right. So the next thing you're talking about is setup. As a new player, when you launch the game, first thing that you're going to notice right away is it's going to launch in a window. Basically, it's going to launch at like a 1600 by 900 window, and it's going to be very small on your screen. First thing you want to do is set your screen resolution to the value equal to the resolution on the monitor you're going to play on. Mine is a 2560 by 1440, but if yours is a traditional 1080 style monitor, so 1920 by 1080, set it to 1920 by 1080. Set it to borderless as well. And then the next thing you're going to want to do right away, you might even want to do this first, is go to your audio controls and crank down all the volumes, because Squad by default has everything maxed to 100 and it'll blow your ears out, especially the first time an explosion goes off right next to your ears or a grenade goes off right next to your ears. It'll literally almost blow your eardrums out. So I prefer to set my volumes lower, because then they can always be adjusted higher, okay? What level works for you is up to you. It also depends on your headsets or headphones. I'm wearing studio monitor. Even though they're earbuds, they're studio monitors by Bose, so the sound replication and sound amplification is greater than a traditional set of just regular headsets. So adjust your sliders accordingly. I personally don't like a lot of in-game sounds other than gunfire and people moving and vehicles moving and explosions. I don't need to hear background music. I don't need to hear UI clicks, and I don't need to hear comms beeps from people talking back and forth to one another. So I have a lot of those options turned off, okay? All right. So when you are first launching the game, we've gone through some of the basics of turning down your audio volumes to different levels. I have 65% master volume, 50% effects volume. UI and music are off completely because I've been in the game for so long. I don't need to hear all of these things. And then my out-of-game volume is set to the same as my master. It's 65%. As far as my VoIP or in-game comm levels, I have command voice, which is squad leader to commander. That's 100%. Squad comms, which is me talking with the rest of my squad members, that's at 80%. And then my local voice comms are at 200%. That means when somebody is within about 30 meters of me, I have the potential to hear them as long as there's no other vehicles or any other things going on around me, like a helicopter landing, an armored vehicle passing by, a logistics truck passing by. It gives me an opportunity to hear someone at least from a distance away. The other thing that I've done, and that's just because I squad lead and I run commander from time to time, I have my balances offset from one another. So I have commander and squad leader communications come in my left ear. I have my squad balance set to my right ear. That way, when I'm a squad leader, if someone in my squad is talking to me, I'll only hear it in my right ear. If another squad leader or commander is talking to me, I'll only hear it in my left ear. If someone is talking to me in local, I'll hear it in both ears. Now, keep in mind, that is only for when I'm running commander and or squad leader. If I'm just a squad member, then everything's going to come in stereo, whether it's local or squad comms. All right. Let's see, as far as the audio goes, the radio filter, I have that turned off. I don't need to hear the static. And the immersion in squad is enough where I don't need every little feature turned on. So I turn that off. However, I've got command beeps enabled. So when you depress the key on a walkie-talkie or a CB radio, it'll beep at you. Well, when I'm in the game and I get so immersed on playing, I'll hear a beep and someone talk and then a beep afterwards. That lets me know it's a squad leader / commander communication versus a player communication, like a person in local or someone in my squad talking to me. All right, graphics wise, here's the thing that most people struggle with. If you have a middle of the road PC, as in you can't afford the latest and greatest GPU or the latest and greatest CPU, you have to settle for something that's more within your budget. That doesn't mean you can't play the game. It just means you have to lower your settings to give yourself the highest level of performance. What that equates to is setting things such as, you'll notice I have a lot of things set on high. You're not going to be able to do that with a middle-of-the-road PC or a low-end AMD Ryzen CPU. You're going to have to change your settings so that you can optimize your best performance. And the only way to do that is trial and error. So by default, start with everything on medium. And then, so you can choose graphics quality medium, and that'll set everything to medium. But what I recommend people doing is taking off or removing the checks in the majority of these options, because they just take away from your overall performance, and it actually makes the game for some people, motion blur and ambient occlusion and lens flare and things of that nature, actually to the eyes, it actually causes people headaches and maybe even a little nauseating if you're not familiar with that type of setting. So I recommend the first time you launch Squad and go in and perform certain activities and you get engaged and start learning the game, turn all that stuff off. And then as you get used to the game, then you can turn some of those features on. So my recommendation to start off with is you want anti-aliasing turned on. I set mine on high with 8 samples, but that's because I'm streaming this game and I want a high level of quality for the people that are viewing my content. Also, when I go to create videos and highlights and clips, I want a high degree of detail so that people can see what I'm looking at and what I see. But for you playing the game, if you're not streaming, then you can turn the anti-aliasing off. I turn off low quality environment, I turn off tessellation, and all the tessellation does, it's micro details in the terrain. You don't need that level of detail to play the game. It's very dependent upon the in-game shaders being utilized, so I just turn it off. Uncapped texture pool size, I turn that off because it does impact performance. Shadow quality, I have contact shadows turned off. Ambient occlusion, I have set to low, and then I've got the screen space AO turned off. When you get down to lens flare, turn that off. Post-processing quality is medium for me because there's bloom and lens flare that's tied to that. So it's set to medium right now. You can always tweak these things in game just to see how it works for you. Just remember, anytime you make a change to audio or graphics, you're going to have to go down here to this bottom setting down here, this bottom button that says apply settings. That way you can still keep going. Now, keep in mind, there are certain settings in this game that, like audio input, also like here on the audio tab, this audio input device, if I change my audio input device, you see this little asterisk right here? That means I'm going to have to apply the settings, exit the game, and restart it. And anytime you make a change like this, I actually recommend you just restart the computer fresh, because sometimes it won't pick up your change. Okay? As far as other recommendations, my number one recommendation after you get all, the setup of the game as far as graphics and the audio, the next thing you need to do is you need to go to the controls. And the reason I say this is because, number one, you need to get used to what the controls are, number one. But number two, my recommendation for people is squads controls, for the most part, are consistent with other first-person shooters. So, the WASD, that's your movement controls. Your Q and E are your leans, left and leans right. Space is jump. Shift is run, But in some instances, they're slightly different. So for some first-person shooter games, I know that control isn't utilized for crouch. Some computer games like Tarkov, I think PUBG as well, use C for crouching. Even Arma 3, I believe, uses C for crouching. So you just have to make sure that you set the game up in a way that you can pick up the controls in an intuitive manner. So if you're used to pressing C for crouch, change it in the menu. But just make sure before you change something, scroll through the list to make sure that that particular key is not used for something else. Okay? The reason I say that, for instance, and the reason that's important, is if you go to the infantry tab here, this middle tab. Remember I said you could put control, instead of control, you could use C for your crouching. Well, that is also that's a bipod toggle. So there are certain weapons in the game that have bipods, and C is the key that's utilized to deploy the bipod. So if you opt to change your settings for your overall gameplay to say that crouch is equal to C, then that means toggling the bipod, you're going to need to change that to something else. So just before you make a change, check through the different keystrokes here and the commands for that to make sure you've got everything set up correctly. All right. So that talks about as far as the initial setup for the best performance and your initial setup of the game itself in order to have the best overall experience for first launching the game. Next time, what we're going to talk about is going into the training menu, going through the tutorial if you're a new player, and then how to go to the shooting range area for these different factions and get more specific about learning about the functions and how to switch between roles, rearming, learning some basic in-game mechanics, learning about damage to vehicles, and things of that nature. So until next time, appreciate everybody hanging out. We'll do part 2 of this series. I'll try to get it put together sometime within the next week or so, and we'll go through the next step of the process of helping you get better with squad. Until next time, we'll see you later. My name is Cowboy Chuck. I stream on Twitch Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, typically starting around the 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Occasionally, those dates and times may change due to family obligations, school-related functions, and other things that potentially impact time. But I do my best to stick to that schedule. If you like this content, share it with your friends, pass it around to other people that you think might be interested in the game. If you have some questions, feel free to stop by the stream after you've watched this video and the other ones coming down the pipe, and just let me know if there's things that you think maybe would be of value to somebody else, or any recommendations for improving it. But again, thanks for being here, and hope to see you on stream in the future, and hopefully you like the content. Thanks. See you guys later.